Should journalists spend time and effort building their personal brands? Apparently, the older the journalist, the less they think so. We'll get past the age elements of this story and talk about social media and your personal brand in this episode of For Immediate Release. Another fine podcast from the FIR Podcast Network.
This is For Immediate Release, the podcast for communicators.
And welcome to episode number 241 of For Immediate Release. I'm Shel Holtz.
And I'm Neville Hobson. Interesting story today. In today's journalism job market, having your own brand is key to survival. That's what Nieman Report says in a pretty interesting article published recently. They talk about traditional funding models are falling apart. Few institutions can offer job stability. The threat of a layoff is always looming, making branding imperative to staying employed somehow, whether with another outlet or as a freelancer. Is this just journalism or does this apply elsewhere? So Nieman writes, or Julia Craven as the writer, she does a pretty good job in this narrative report with sprinkled examples of what some people have done or haven't done in this area. But reality is definitely to the forefront in this, with the pressures on people in any industry. The focus here is journalism. I think it's a valid focus on finding ways to make yourself visible that takes into account your skills and your experience and indeed your brand at a time when more people are needing to do this. And as Nieman said, traditional funding models are falling apart. So jobs are scarce as well. You've got to do something to make yourself stand out. She starts off with an example of two reporters. This is actually quite interesting. Maggie Haberman, New York Times, Taylor Lawrence, currently at the Washington Post, who got into a real row on Twitter earlier in March, just a few weeks back. Their back and forth, which involved several industry titans and received commentary from many others, was about how much building a brand matters in the industry or profession of journalism. Lawrence is very keen on that. Haberman denies having a brand in spite of having 1.7 million followers on Twitter. So she does have a brand, but different perspectives on that. Most interesting, I thought. What caught my attention as well on this, Shell, was the natural kind of progression of how the story goes, looking at social media. One advantage of social media branding, according to Nieman, is that journalists can spread the news further without the hindrance of a paywall. There's a 2019 study on media branding practices finding that journalists understand that building a brand is an opportunity to gain an extensive following, obtain name recognition, and network. But when it comes to motivations for branding, there was a clear generational difference. Older, more experienced journalists were more willing to produce organizationally focused branding for their employers. In comparison, younger journalists were much more interested in focusing on their own brand. That's according to Logan Molyneux, an associate journalism professor at Temple University and lead author of the study. This is exactly what you see in the split between Haberman and Lawrence, he says. You have an older journalist who has tenure, who has the unquestioned support of the institution, and a younger journalist who ends up leaving the Times because they weren't there for her when she came under attack. So there's a scene setter there, Shel. I think it's a valid argument, and I'm sure we'll learn some more things about all of this in a bit. But what's your thinking on this? Is there a generational divide that is the kind of benchmark for this, or is this just supposition?
Well, we're both over 60, so I don't know how much of a generational divide there is here. I believe in brand building, that personal brand, the brand of me, as I think it was Fast Company had on their front page, 15, 20 years ago? Of course, Maggie Haberman has a brand. I've read one of her books. I see her as a talking head on one of the cable news shows. Of course she has a brand. If she's not out there trying to build it, that's another thing. But for her to claim that she doesn't have one is ridiculous. Of course she does. And in this article, Jay Rosen, whom we've talked about many times on the show, he's a journalism professor at NYU. He writes the Press Think blog. He says he encourages his students to do this. He says it's crucial to carve out a space on the web, whether it's a personal website or a blog or a Twitter account. It's theirs, and it's independent of the publication they work for. Look, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but maybe 12 or 13 years ago, Bill Briggs invited me to come out to San Jose State University and talk to the faculty. He was the chair of, or the dean of the journalism school at the time, and I know Bill because he's an IABC fellow, like me. And after spending a lot of time with Bill and the journalism faculty at SJSU, one of them said, "What aren't we teaching that we need to be teaching?" And I mean, there was absolutely no hesitation from me. I said entrepreneurialism. With the contraction of the newspaper industry, so many of these papers going out of business, others closing bureaus and shrinking their editorial staff, where you're going to be working next year is a question if you want to be a journalist. And you need to figure out how to sell yourself. It could be that you're selling yourself to prospective employers who need to hire journalists and are going to want to hire somebody who has a high profile and a strong brand. And it may be that you end up selling your own content through Substack or some tool like that. But of course you need to have a brand as a journalist or as any other kind of professional in this world.
Yeah, that's true. I agree with that. I thought the example in this article of a woman and what she did in 2006 approximately was really, really good. Exactly how it was in 2006 about that time. So that's 15 years ago, a bit more than that actually. It's still valid today, I think. It's even more competitive today than it was then. So what is this example? It's a story of a woman called Bennett Wilson, who's now a senior editor at The Point Guy. And she made an astute observation about where the industry was headed. This was back in 2006. And she realized that if she didn't adapt, her job would be at risk. So she traveled from Baltimore to attend trainings in New York and Orlando on WordPress, audio, blogging, and a whole ton of things more. Along the way, she organically developed a brand. Quotes her, "I was not sitting there thinking, oh gosh, I need to become a brand," she says. "I was writing about the commercial aviation industry. I'm a black woman with natural hair and crazy glasses who wears brightly colored clothes in an industry that is still white male dominated. I couldn't hide even if I wanted to. I would go to events and then one day somebody said, 'You just walk in here like you're the aviation queen.' And I laughed and I didn't think anything of it," she said. "And then people started calling me that. So I was like, well, I guess this is my brand." She bought the domain name and secured the Twitter handle. "I adopted all of this stuff. I embraced it. I ran with it and I still do. I think it expanded my network," she says. "I think it gave me authority and gravitas in the industry." Unfortunately, not everyone is like that. I would argue that those who are like that are the ones who will likely, more than not, succeed in their next journey on the path that they're on in this changing world we're in. So a lot of it is down to what you have to do yourself as an individual to make yourself visible, play to your strengths, know what you can offer the world that's different to someone else. So you've got to have a differentiator. She was someone who had a passion in the industry that male dominated, as she says. And here's a woman, a black one at that, with crazy glasses, or the hair. One of them was crazy anyway. Brightly colored clothes. And she stood out, but she knew stuff. So she wasn't just a flash in the pan. She had something to offer. And I see plenty of examples of that around. So I'm not aware of the ones that you don't see, of course. But you've got to do that kind of thing, I think. And if there's recognition in an industry or a profession that teaching and training and learning can help people embark on that road, such as what you read out about Jay Rosen and others, I think that's terrific. So there's a lot of work still to be done. But reality, you've got to differentiate yourself in this time, without doubt, no matter what your profession.
Sure. And if you're flamboyant like she is, that's easy. If you're not, you still need to stake out a space. And the communications industry is sort of the opposite of the journalism industry right now. It's growing. There are plenty of jobs. Organizations are hiring more communicators, not fewer. But still, if you want that plum job, that choice job, you want to stand out from everybody else. And, you used to do that by having a great resume, right? And resumes are you still need one, but that's not what people are really looking at anymore. I mean, you want somebody, when they see that you've applied for the job, to go, oh my God, this person's applied for that job? Have you read the posts that they write on LinkedIn? They're absolute genius. We need to hire this person. Even in communications, I mean, even in engineering or whatever. I mean, these are the A-lists in that micro-influencer community that we talk about. You and I went after those back in our crayon days, if you remember Yes to Carrots.
Sure.
We went after bloggers and podcasters in the spa and beauty space.
Well, we did that back in 2006, 2007, 2008 to 9.
Right.
I mean, I've done that since then. And again, this comes down to what you feel confident in doing yourself, and whether you've got the kind of the guts and the gumption to do it. Not everyone does. Have you got something that makes you stand out? This is not about being, pushy, ego-driven, flamboyant, although many are. It's about knowing you've got something you can make a difference to somebody, and that's what you need to do. One of the points the article makes is interesting. Talk about there are very few options outside of building a recognizable brand for journalists who are just starting out, working as freelancers, or don't have a high level of name recognition already. A lot of younger journalists understand that, and they don't have this big reaction of self-promotion because it's just normal for them. That's according to Jay Rosen. That's interesting, I think, Shell, because there is still, I suspect, a difficulty for many where their prime focus, I guess, is promoting their employer's brand, i.e. the work they do. The older you are, that's the traditional way, and you still do it. The younger you are, according to all of this thinking, and I don't disagree with any of this at all, is that you're going to be promoting your own brand more than the employer brand. And that plays the point you just made, where people notice what you're doing on social networks, let's say, or wherever it might be, that there's something that people will talk about that you have created, as opposed to that person, we should hire him because he or she works for this company. That's not the case in this example. I'm not saying it's not the case at all. It is, of course, but it's changing. And this is more likely to differentiate you.
Sure, and they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, you can be building your own brand while promoting your employer, and it might be a different employer next month, and you're still building your own brand and promoting your employer. But it is important to build your brand. I mean, right now, where I work, I'm launching an employee advocacy program, and part of the pitch that I'm making to get people to raise their hands to be part of the pilot program is this is an opportunity for you to build your brand. Even though they're going to be promoting my company's content, it's an opportunity for them to build their brand by presenting the stuff in their tone, with their words, with their enthusiasm, and presenting their skills, their knowledge, their capability along the way. So, yeah, I mean, I saw one statistic on employee advocacy that said people tend to expand their connections by 10% a year when they join an employee advocacy program. So just by sharing this stuff, you tend to get more followers and build that brand even further. So I think it matters for anybody out there who's looking to establish themselves and become recognizable in the space where they operate.
Yeah, get to it, folks. This is a big deal to do this. So just do it.
And that'll be a 30 for this episode of For Immediate Release.